أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قال رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Sadaqallahul Azim. Hello and welcome. Assalamu alaikum to this very special broadcast. I'm Kashif Shehzada, your host, and I am joined from the Netherlands by Rianne C, Veen, who is an environmental activist, a Dutch Muslim, and she's also an author, and she has a very interesting background. She is somebody that we wish to speak a lot, and hopefully in the next 60 minutes we will be picking her brains on a number of things that we in Pakistan are very interested to know. And she brings with her a very specialism on environmental issues, on climate change, on green Muslims. And this is an area which is developing across the Muslim world, and particularly in Pakistan. There has been a recent rejuvenation of this interest by the government itself as well, and a number of green initiatives are taking place. So, over to you, Ryan. How would you describe yourself? I understand you are a Dutch Muslim. Where did it all begin? How did you come to Islam, and what was the catalyst for you to accept this faith?
Great question. Thank you, Brother Kashif. And I'm really happy to be on your program and also the Pakistan. I've visited your country in 2010, unfortunately for a reason because you had floods. But yeah, with the humanitarian situation. So I have a nice connection, or when I went to Pakistan, very nice people. So thank you for having me on this show. Actually, my background, environmental issues was actually an interest of mine way before I ever heard of Islam. I actually grew up in a very, very secular household. I was born in the Netherlands, but then due to my parents' work in the oil business, grew up in different locations. And some key issues that really, I think, formed me were when I was living in Argentina. We were living on a compound with all the works, very quite luxurious, but actually right next to a slum and next to a harbor where there had clearly been an oil disaster. And it's like, this isn't right. How come I've got all these things and others don't? That was really at the back of my mind. And I was like, well, when you grow up, you'll know. Then moving around some more, and then really having questions like, who am I? What's my place on this world? But I didn't know where to look for it. So after my law degree in the Netherlands, ended up moving to Belgium, and thought, well, now I'm supposed to know what life's about because, I got my degree, I got my job, etc. And I still didn't know. But what I did know was about education. Like, I didn't want to get got into it. So my list of questions was already like this long. So I started doing a second master's actually in international politics. And that was in the autumn of 2001. So obviously, second week was a terrible attack of 9/11. Completely, obviously, condemned that. What it triggered, though, is that got a professor who came in and said, actually, the religion is often abused by politics. And this time round, it's about this. So I bought myself a copy of the Quran, and I was like, this is an environmentalist Bible. So it like really appealed to me in that sense. And it took a while before I was really convinced, and also had the better connotation because of how Islam is often in the news. But yeah, it felt like a homecoming because I'd always had this interest and care for environment, but I didn't know why or how. And really happy I found my place there.
Okay, so you studied the Quran by your own self.
Yeah.
and you decided, basically it was the Quran that inspired you, and that you really found to be the ultimate truth. And did any Muslim scholar play any part? Did any Islamic speaker influence you? Did you listen to any speakers? There's so many Muslim speakers out there. Did any one of them appeal to you?
Well, it wasn't just the Quran. It was also obviously the life of the Prophet and reading around it. To be honest, I did a personal study. Obviously, I did consult lots of resources, and I've been blessed with higher education, so I knew how to do research. But my thought was like, so I've only heard about Islam, and especially the environmental side and the positive side, in my late 20s. How come I haven't heard about it before? Might I have gotten uh, only a partial vision? I don't now want to have a partial visual from the Muslims. I want to do my own independent research and only come out after I've done my own homework. So yes, it was personal study, but lots of it, and really double checking matters, and obviously also checking reputation. I wouldn't take anything at face value, especially from people who didn't have themselves a good education.
Okay, and you took the Shahada in where? Was it in Belgium or in Birmingham? Where was it?
It was in actually in Belgium on the way to the UK. So
All right.
yeah.
So you have all, I understand you also lived in Birmingham. I'm also a former resident of Birmingham. I studied
Oh,
in Birmingham. My career was in Birmingham. I was married in Coventry, and my daughter was born in Birmingham. So you're talking to a Brummy. So are you a
yeah.
Brummy?
Well, import export Brummy, because obviously I went there, and I've now left the UK again following a Brexit situation as a EU citizen. So moved to the Netherlands, but yeah, I lived in the UK for last time around 15 years.
Oh, that's a shame. So, how was life in Birmingham? Were you there as a Muslim? So, what was your experience of living as a Muslim, European Muslim in Birmingham?
Sure. Well, I significantly worked for a faith-based agency over there doing humanitarian work. So that really helped have Muslim colleagues, but obviously not all colleagues were Muslim. What I also very much appreciated is it's a very diverse city, and was very much engaged in faith-based ideas, especially coming from a non-religious background and feeling inspired by Islam as my chosen faith, but also realizing that actually we need everybody on board. So it's not then about saying, oh, you've got the wrong conviction. No, as long as it's a constructive conviction that motivates you, then let's go for it. So for several years also active in the Birmingham Council of Faiths, where we also did some environment work, saying, okay, so you've got your faith, but let's all share how it should all motivate us to do positive things. And also within Friends of the Earth in Birmingham, with a Christian colleague, also set up a program around faith and climate change, where it was indeed like one. The inspiration about it is like many of us have been given a brain to think about it, but even if you don't understand the science, is scientists have with their God-given brain done the homework and found this. But even then, even if science wouldn't be clear, is there still commands in our respective faith books to take care of the environment, and we try to work on that, and we're so successful at some point we're invited to number 10. So
Okay. Did you enjoy Pakistani food while you were in Birmingham?
I ate loads of varieties of food. I think, to be honest, the Pakistani food in Pakistan was sometimes nicer than it was in Birmingham. No offense to Brummies,
Yes.
but obviously it's quite different. And I think that's one of the beauties that and one of the actually ayahs that or aspects of Islam that attracted me. That God has created us in all shapes and forms, and nations and tribes, so as to get to know each other. So why should I stick to my food, or you stick to yours? Let's benefit from it and enjoy the variety.
Yeah.
But yeah, when I had it in Pakistan, I think it was nicer. That was
Oh,
2010. Yeah.
okay. Okay. Now, uh, your interest in environmental studies and looking at the way things are, what do you think is the environmental challenge, or rather, the crisis of climate change that we are in simpler words? What is it that we are going through as a human species, as a planet as a whole? What's the problem?
Well, you can look at it scientifically, and all the research saying that the number of species we're killing off is just on a very bad trend. But even as I mentioned earlier, if that is too complicated, just we should follow what our faith says, and we've been put on this earth as a guardian. So I sometimes use the simple metaphor, saying if I ask my friend to hold my bag when I need to go to the bathroom or something, she will make sure that my bag is still there when I come back from the bathroom. But why do we care more about our friend's bag when you just pop off to the bathroom than that we care about this whole beautiful planet that God has created for us and given us a job as guardian of creation? I mean, chapter 6, verse 165. It's not just an honorary title that we can walk around and say, oh, look, God has made us a Khalifa. Isn't that beautiful? In a normal job, I believe we'd have been sacked ages ago, because we're making a big mess out of it. So it's about being aware that the job God has given us is that. And obviously, it's totally different for a European Muslim who's got quite some privilege compared to somebody from a poor village in Pakistan. You cannot expect the same response. But there again, from Islam, we know that on Day of Judgment, we'll all be assessed by what we could do. So if the only thing you could do is make dua, then mashallah, that's it. But if you were in a position to do more, then we should do more. So the climate crisis is created by man, and we should, or humanity, and we should all solve it. But even without a crisis, we should still, look after our shared home.
Okay, looking at your research, you specialize in faith based approaches to environmental activism. Have you had a chance to explore Muslim countries, Muslim societies, and their approaches to tackling environmental issues?
Yeah, actually, that was the topic of my third master's, was indeed that I did through the Open University in the UK. Very blessed to be in a position to do that. And I think there we need to distinguish very much between Islam and Muslims. That Islam is very clear, but sometimes as Muslims, we're people, we're humans, we make mistakes. We go for different gods, god of money. We are too greedy. So yeah, I think Islam is clear, but sometimes as Muslims we forget that what that means is we can't just during Jummah say, oh, okay, I'm a Muslim, I go to the mosque and enjoy the khutbah, and then I go out and do like everyone else. No, we should actually absorb those words. Because again, that's what I found so inspiring, that the reason we're asked to pray 5 times a day is not that is the objective. The reason we're asked to pray 5 times a day, because God knows that we're very forgetful and we need to be reminded of the words. So what do we then do with the reminders of those words? Do we say, tick the box and say, okay, I've done this prayer, I've done that prayer, now go back and do what everyone else does? Or do I absorb those words and do what I should be doing?
Okay, now looking at Pakistan, here we've had recently a new prime minister 2 years back, Imran Khan, who is a world famous celebrity, and he has kick-started a project which is plant 10 billion trees. He has set a target that in Pakistan he has a plan, a vision to plant 10 billion trees within 5 years, from 2018 to 2023. What do you think about such projects? Should such projects be replicated in other parts of the world? And have you had a chance, to see Pakistan's environmental policies?
To be honest, I haven't looked at the recent Pakistan environment policies. My visit was in 2010, so I'm sure lots of things have happened since then through my online intercultural dialogue work. I have met virtually colleagues and friends from Pakistan. On the idea of tree planting, I have for some years been a trustee of Tree Aid, which is another British NGO who focuses in planting trees, especially in certain African countries. And tree planting is definitely a good idea. The thing is, it's also important how you do it, where you do it, etc. For example, it's important to choose native species. If you choose non-native species, you can actually do more harm than good. As a consultant, did a project in Vietnam, which was very interesting, where they tried to think ahead and they planted trees along a certain path so that if the school would get flooded, the kids would still know in which direction to swim, so they would swim in the direction of safety as opposed to in the direction of danger. So that is something maybe that Pakistani schools can do. Also, trees are very good with their roots in keeping the soil more stabilized. So that's a good idea. Maybe mountainous areas. Also, what you want to do is look at maybe trees which have multiple functions. They can indeed stabilize the soil, but they can also provide shade. But if you choose fruit-bearing ones, you can also enable poor people to have nutritious food and help people with their health. So, tree planting is good as long as it's not just a gimmick, but really is part of a wider, bigger plan, and especially also making people aware as to why you're encouraging people to plant trees, and indeed how it's important to choose native ones, etc.
Okay, moving from planting trees to the seas. Now, I'm in Karachi. Karachi is a coastal city of Pakistan. I'm an animal lover. My dad was an animal lover. We've kept a lot of pets in our house. We had a dog. My last dog was a Labrador. So I don't have a dog right now. My mom, she doesn't like, big dogs jumping at her. She's very old, actually. So, but anyway, coming to oceans, one concern that we have had is Pakistan's coastal line is, it has a habitat to a number of wildlife species, particularly a breed of sharks known as whale sharks. I wonder if you know the whale shark is the biggest, largest species of fish. A whale is obviously not a fish, a whale is a mammal, but within the fishes variety, the whale shark is the largest, known to be the largest fish. And we have many whale sharks getting stranded in the seas of Karachi and coming, to the beach, and they're dying. Why is that happening, and what can we do to prevent this, the species from dying and getting, extinct?
These are a number of questions in one. I'll try to answer it. From research I've done, I understand that several sea species can get lost or distracted for a number of reasons. One, because there's so many ships going around putting out sounds, so they think that it's their fellow animals sending out the sound, and then it's actually a ship, so they end up swimming in the wrong direction. Also, fish are often dependent on currents, and due to climate change, certain currents are being affected, so they end up again swimming in the wrong direction. Another aspect is because there's so much plastic ending up in the oceans, is that they're eating plastic and then feeling sick of that, and then maybe ending up there. So lots of things. So the solution isn't then trying or just getting the animals back to sea, but reflecting. And I think that's again where Islam comes in. It's like the first word that was revealed is like ikra, like read, use your mind, is how come this is happening. So not just look at the symptom, but try to look at the cause. And there again, I'm totally understanding that a poor person from a village cannot be expected to solve it all, but as a collective, we can do so. So avoid the reasons that the animals end up on the coast. Also, talking coast is very important to think about impact from man-made climate change, like all the emissions in terms of rising sea levels. I'm in the Netherlands. Most of the country is below sea level, so the Netherlands is tiny and has a lot of is a rich country, so able to put up dikes and all kinds of protection, but obviously need to be aware that not all countries can afford to do that, so need to think ahead on such matters. Also, maybe if I can mention two examples of really how, as humans, we need to learn from aspects. I know when the big tsunami hit in 2004, is Sri Lanka was one of the countries hit really hard. Obviously, lots of countries were hit really hard, but a specific research that was done on the coast there of an island is part of the coast had been modernized to make tourist resorts and develop it to get tourist money, etc. And another part of the country was still underdeveloped, and there still had the all kinds of like indigenous tree species that live half in the ocean, half in on the coast. What happened is on the side of the resorts, there was much more damage because the waves were so strong. They just went through all of that developed part, whilst the part which was still so-called non-developed, those trees acted as wave breakers, and they cause much less damage. So when we think we want to modernize, we need to think through like what is actually modernizing, and not think that we know better than nature. That's one example. And also, the example that came to mind with coastal areas is one of the organizations I'm involved with is Islamic Foundation for Ecology and Environment Sciences. They did a project off the coast of Tanzania with poor fishermen. It's a very special area, and fishermen had started to use gunpowder to catch fish. And obviously that wasn't very good for the coral reefs, etc. But how do you convince people that they shouldn't use gunpowder to catch fish if fish is their livelihood? So several stakeholders had tried by making it illegal, etc. But if somebody's hungry, he will do what is needed. So I was very happy to hear that in the end, IFES was involved, and they sat down with the village elders, with the imams, and said, what does your faith say? And then they said, oh, actually, our faith says we shouldn't ruin the environment. I'm paraphrasing, obviously. We don't want to use gunpowder to catch fish anymore, but we do need a livelihood. But now that we understand that our old livelihood isn't sustainable, we're more open to being taught a new livelihood. So now they're doing eco elements and helping each other catch fish, but with more sustainable means. So again, it's about looking at the bigger picture, and then also helping the stakeholders to do what they can. So said you can't expect the poor fishermen to save the planet when rich people are just dumping everything everywhere.
Okay, now talking about wildlife, here in Pakistan, hunting is very commonplace. We have obviously you need a license to hunt, but hunting does happen, and environmental activists have said that a number of species have gone extinct because of that. Uh, what is your take as an environmentalist on hunting, and how can we protect, species which are, nearing extinction? What is your view?
Sure. I personally don't like hunting at all. I couldn't kill an animal, but I think we need to distinguish why are people doing hunting. Is it for fun? Then obviously it's a totally different thing than if people are doing it for survival. And is similar with um, other species by the indigenous people, for example, in Canada and elsewhere, is it's the people who are directly killing the animals who are getting the blame for the extinction. But actually, if you look at it from the numbers and what is the biggest risk, it's the decrease of their habitat. So if collectively we're chopping down all the forests, we're making it impossible for the animals to have enough space to go around, and then one of them gets killed by hunting. Yes, it's not nice that that one got killed by hunting, but let's not ignore the much wider aspects, because it can be really easy for outsiders to say, oh, don't do the hunting. But if it's hunting for survival by indigenous people and they've been doing that lifestyle since forever, then I think it's a completely different thing than if somebody comes from outside and just kills animals for no reason. So it's a bit of a more complex picture, would be my view.
Okay. Now, recently in Pakistan, with this new government, if Imran Khan, there is an aspiration to make Pakistan a tourist destination, to have more and more tourists visit, our areas like northern areas and other places of interest. Now, Pakistan is largely, it's not an industrialized society, and many geographical regions are, untouched by, modern industry and things like that. You go to the north, you go to the mountainous regions, and they are not, polluted. They are pure, they have pure waters. And even, because modernity is not there. Now with tourism, wouldn't that get disturbed? What would be your advice as an environmentalist to a country having a tourism policy? What is it that needs to be done to ensure that tourism does not, cause pollution, and it doesn't impact the environment negatively? What advice would you give?
Sure. Well, again, it would be fairly general, like things to consider in doing it. Is I totally appreciate that Pakistan, like any other country, wants avenues of development, in that sense, and tourism could be a good one. It again depends how they do it. I mentioned earlier about how Sri Lanka was affected differently by the tsunami, but the part which had been developed for tourism and the part that hadn't been developed. So if you do it with nature as opposed to being arrogant and chopping things off, then it could be. And also being mindful of the environment. So if it's a very sensitive area, then maybe limit the number of tourists, or have it in a certain season. So not in the, just to give an example, bird breeding season, so that during those crucial parts for the system to survive, that they do have the peace and quiet in that. I mean, there's lots of eco-tourism as well. So I guess I would say it depends what kind of tourism. Do you want mass tourism, who don't mind where on the planet they are, as long as they have all-you-can-eat buffets? I would say that is very much a short-term agenda. But if you appeal to people's wider interest, I think it could really help people appreciate the environment more if they've actually been on top of a beautiful mountain, etc. And also do it very much with the indigenous and local people. In that sense, too many examples where maybe a national, and I'm not saying this about Pakistan, I don't know the details, but generally I've seen examples where a national government may say, oh, we want to develop the country, let's pick those beautiful areas where indigenous and local people have lived since forever. But if those original habitants don't get the fruits from it, they will have a poverty, they will fall into poverty. And I think that would be the wrong way to go about it. So really include the local people. They know the mountains, they know all the area. Let them show it around, and maybe as an alternative lifestyle to hunting or intensive agriculture, for example.
Okay. When I was in Birmingham, I noticed that there was a need for organic food. There was a significant market that was there for anything and everything to do with organic. You had organic cotton, you had organic vegetables, you had organic food. Now in Pakistan, organic is something very basic and very old. We have organic chicken, for example. If I want to buy chicken, it is largely organic and it's available as it has been there for a long period of time. And we have organic oils, we have organic supplements like ginger and garlic and whatnot. We have a very potential to develop organic market for organic stuff. What do you see as the current climate for organic produce in somewhere like the Netherlands? Is there a market? Are people more aware? Do they prefer organic food, and is it more expensive than non-organic food? What is the market like?
I love your questions, because again, organic, like you say, organic has been the normal way of growing things all over the planet for the majority of humanity's time on this planet. It's only since the industrial era, maybe after Second World War, that you've got the really intensive agriculture with using lots of chemical fertilizers and fossil fuel machinery doing that has kind of like through clever marketing become the norm, and therefore organic is being sold as hippie, premium, special, completely putting it out of the reach of especially poor people's wallet, which is really not fair. I think therefore we need to look again at the bigger picture. If you look at the nutrition of that intensively grown food, it looks nice, but if you analyze it chemically, you need to eat like 6 apples to get the same number of vitamins from of an organic apple. As an example, like that kind of difference. So, especially as you mentioned, you've lived in Birmingham. I don't know if you're aware of a project that was there for quite some years, where you had some immigrant communities actually have a community garden.
Yes, I know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that even if they didn't have money
Yeah,
for...
sorry, it was, I believe, at Cannon Hill Park
That's one
in
that came later, but there
in
was
Edgbaston.
That's one that came later, indeed. So I used to have a radio show and interviewed those people, like excellent examples. No, there was actually, the name escapes me, but it was really like local initiative by two different immigrant communities who missed their vegetables from back home. And you couldn't yet buy them in the shops. Plus, they were dependent on day labor work. So they said, even if we don't have income from our day labor job, we still want to be able to eat decently, so we can stay strong and find a job the next day. So that was done for several years in a group of back gardens together. And then when they started having more stable jobs, etc., they gave that up because it kind of had like a negative connotation. So I think in terms of, buy organic or not, it's more about also the mindset that we have. And there, as Muslims, we can use our faith. Is why do we want to go out? And I'm especially obviously talking about people who've got the means to have a paid job. Why do we want to go out, earn money, to then go to the shop and buy stuff that we can grow at home? Making ourselves vulnerable to bigger matters. Is why is growing your own food seen as something negative? It's kind of like a sign of wealth if you have your garden with a lawn and not with fruit and vegetables. And it doesn't need to be like rows of salad in your front garden. You can mix and match it so it looks like a varied garden, but actually most of the things are edible. And if you use permaculture principles or multi-annual crops, then it doesn't need to take much time. So it's more the mentality that why don't we want to grow food? And then it is organic by nature if we don't use those elements. But it's more like, no, we want to go out to work and then go to the shop and buy it. So I think if we want to make a bigger impact there. And if you do that in Pakistan, you can also have like much more local market there. Adapted to your local setting, but have a nutritious food and trade it locally.
Yes, in Karachi, there is a market that's set up every Sunday for homegrown vegetables. People who grow
Excellent.
them
I
at
love
home.
it.
And I'll share the links with you. My mom actually, she has aloe vera, she grows papayas, she has vegetables, and she keeps feeding me all that all the time. So in Pakistan, there is a trend for home gardening, growing homegrown food, and also people keep goats for milk. People rear chickens and those chickens give eggs. I was reading an article recently by Bill Gates, who had something like that: if you give chickens to poor people, then it will help them economically a lot. I wonder if you've heard anything like that. Bill Gates saying that chickens and eggs, they revive the economy, they help alleviate poverty. Is there something like that?
I'm personally not a fan of Bill Gates, not because of some of the weird stories going around, but more about his approach of focusing on a techno fix. I think it's very dangerous to think we can live the way we do, just wait for this new piece of machinery or new piece of technology or new piece that will make the economy run, and we can just be the same. I think it's more about our mindset, that we need to be more respectful of that. Like if everybody gets chickens, then there's going to be too many of them. I mean, what I like very much also as an example, how sometimes people who are closest to nature are the most humble and the most inspiring, is refugee gardens. when Iran had an earthquake in Bam, I traveled there again as humanitarian aid worker, and just a couple of weeks after the earthquake, although people were living in tents, they had these mini gardens in front of their tents. It's like, and that was, especially as a European Muslim, that was so inspirational. These people have lost everything, they have very little, and still they think about the environment. They still think about nature. That is important. Not the techno fixes that we need iPhones to communicate with the market and know the best price, etc., etc. It's really about holistic system that we need to think about.
Okay, sorry, there was some distortion. Perhaps, if you have, do you have YouTube also in another window? Because there was some sound distortion coming in. If you could please check that. Uh,
I've closed most of my windows and programs, etc. I work very much online.
your voice is, it's inaudible. When you speak, there's sound. Could you please check your, yeah, you've muted it now. Can you please turn it back on?
Do I sound better now?
Yes, it's better now.
Yeah,
Okay.
I unplugged and replugged my mic. Yes, apologies.
Okay. Now, talking about environmental issues, one phenomena which has been cropped up recently is about environmental racism. I wonder if you have heard of environmental racism. Could you please elaborate on what that is and what's your take on it?
Sure, I absolutely appreciate what it is. It's mainly that the ones who are causing climate change, the ones who are causing environmental issues, are generally not the ones who are suffering it. You've got that at a global scale that, generally speaking, rich Western countries are doing most of the emissions. Poor countries in continents like Africa and Asia are feeling most of the consequences. And that obviously is not appropriate, is not just. And I like there very much to always keep in mind the last sermon of Prophet, peace be upon him, that, no white is better than a black and no black is better than white, but for piety. So always keep that in mind. And at the beginning of the program, I mentioned that I was brought up internationally. I am very well aware of the privilege that I did not have any impact on where I was born, but I had the opportunity to have a good education. So racism, in that sense, it's often that people say, oh, but those poor people over there, and often referring to people of color, etc., is they should just pull up their socks and work for it, just like I did. It's like, no, you're not. You weren't born with the same opportunities. It's not just to expect someone who was born in a poor village with no school to do the same thing as someone who's had all of those opportunities. So that putting people in different boxes because of their opportunities, for me, is racism. And oftentimes it also comes obviously with discrimination again in people of color, in that sense. And even within countries, you see that, say, waste dumping grounds are often in areas where you have people of color, minority peoples. And I think that is, I don't know what kind of word I can use for that, but that is so unethical and unjust. And I think the awareness about that is step one, but also then very much about doing action about that. Is what is it that we're all doing about that? And also, again, bearing in mind what each can do. Like, you cannot expect someone who's a victim of living next to a waste ground to solve it by themselves if the one who's causing it isn't willing to do that. You have the bad level playing field. So it happens nationally, but also internationally. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, going back to Europe again, you mentioned Brexit, and unfortunately, you were a teacher at Open University. You had to move back to the Netherlands. How is Brexit impacting, life for European? For example, I have a very dear friend. I wonder if you know of her, Christiane Becker, who
Mm,
is a German but who lives in London. Help her launch her book in Pakistan. She comes here often. Uh, and she also told me there's been some problems, and Brexit has impacted people financially, and there's a lot of turmoil. And as we speak, even now, there is uncertainty about what the UK will sort of a relationship would it have with Europe. So, how do you see Brexit? Was it a good move? Was it, favorable move? What is it?
Well, I think it's a very unfortunate move, and especially the ones who were proposing Brexit, their arguments turned out to be false, and it's the people who fell for those or believed in those false reasons. I do have to clarify, like, yes, I left because of Brexit. I wasn't yet pushed out, but unfortunately or fortunately, because of my background, I saw things coming. And in my garden in the UK, I was turning it into a food forest as a model. And I knew that should I maybe later have to leave, I couldn't take that with me. So I thought to maybe preempt it. And that's why when you mentioned, do I live in Amsterdam? Like, no, I live in a much more rural part of the Netherlands, so that I could afford to have a garden and turn that into a food forest. So it was my choice, but obviously due to uncertainty, I did want to have some certainty. And I'm very well aware of the privilege I have in being able to make that choice. Like, as we're talking environmental issues around climate-related migration, very much aware that many people don't have that option. They've been doing farming for generations, and then desertification is coming, and they can't survive from their agricultural livelihood, and then being forced to migrate. So I'm very conscious have that privileged position, but I wanted to also set that as an example for people here, is that a lawn is very boring, and it is not the low maintenance garden that it's presented to be, because you have to mow it every week and etc. Whilst if you turn it into fruit trees and fruit bushes, normal forest or like natural forest also doesn't have a gardener, or actually it has lots of gardeners. All the animals and the species, they keep each other in balance. So if you set up the right environment in your own garden, species will all sort each other. All you have to do is every so often go out and eat the fruits. So that is what I'm currently doing. And again, using my faith inspiration, trying to also have some of um, uh, the way I'm setting it up. I don't know whether you know that the British Prince Charles, he's got an Islamic garden, which was actually designed for him by another British convert, Emma Clark. And she designed this Islamic garden around, having balance in the garden, so that also your eyes have calmness when you do that. So I'm trying to mimic that. But my own personal twist, also using multi-annual crops, see how they like it here.
You mentioned the garden, and when I read the Quran, I find that the garden is the goal of a believer. Maybe not in this life, but in the hereafter, we will have Jannah. And Jannah, the word is literally translated as a garden, and it will have, Allah says in the Quran in Surah Ar-Rahman, chapter number 55, Liman khafa maqama rabbihi jannatan, that whoever observes Allah's laws, for him or her will be two gardens. Jannatan, the word is in dual. And the garden is so, described in so nice a way that there will be fruits, there will be, milk and honey and wine, and people
I
will have
love that
laughter.
question, and especially also so curious, and especially maybe as a convert, is so as Muslims, we all want to go to that Jannah,
Yes.
but in dunya, we're throwing concrete everywhere, we're taking out nature. It's like, aren't we are we sure about what we want? If that's what we want in Jannah, why not do it in dunya? Have
Yeah.
a practice about that.
Yes. Actually.
And yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, as also we know that this life is like a test. So if in this life we're throwing concrete everywhere and getting rid of nature, how are we showing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we actually really like doing Jannah, and then that is what we want to go for? Like, shouldn't it? It's often like I see it as like an exam. Like, if you want to pass an exam, you don't just sit on the couch and say, "Oh yeah, I'd love to make pass my exam." Make some du'as or do some prayers. No, you practice, and you keep practicing, and you ask your friend to help you. Why don't we do that as well with our job of Khalifa, on terms of taking care of this? Is if we take Islam at the very basic, it's about the maqasid of Sharia. Like, Sharia is the way, and maqasid, like the objectives. The objectives are the protection of life, dignity, belief, progeny, and wealth. How can we do that in a dead environment? How can we do that on a dead planet? So we should look at that and practice that in our own little garden. Because, as I said, I find it really hard to understand. Like, if you want garden in the next life, you can have it in this life as a, obviously not the same type of garden, but just show that you want it.
Yes, actually, I was arriving at that. There are some Islamic scholars who say that, when you read about Jannah in the Quran, then that Jannah also occurs on earth. It is not just a celestial Jannah, but the goal of a Muslim is to establish Jannah fil ard as well, that Jannah on the earth as well, a
Yeah,
garden. And we see early Muslims that when they established their countries, the garden was a very prominent, geographical milestone, or landmark of that architecture. If you
yeah.
see Mughal architecture, the Mughals made splendid gardens. You go to the Middle East, you will see gardens everywhere.
Alhambra in southern Spain.
Yes,
Yeah.
and but the garden is also an analogy for a society which is truly based on Islamic principles. It is a society where there
And
is
how we
happiness.
also should take Islam, like the word ayah is a verse in the Quran, but ayah is also used as a sign in creation. So we cannot lock ourselves up in a room and read the Quran and know it by heart, and that is enough. Neither can we go outside and worship nature by itself. It's about the two in balance. Like a bird needs two wings, you need to read the Quran and read the religious text, but at the same time also look outside. What is happening? If nature is disappearing, then we should do about that. And we've been warned in chapter 30, verse 41, around corruption on this earth because of the hand of man. And I'm not saying that the poor villager did it all by himself, but as humanity, we have brought on corruption, and it's then the blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to show us in this life, is saying, hey, I think you're going off the path. Maybe you should reflect now and maybe get back onto the straight path, so that you're not only being faced with it on day of judgment, but in this life. So even me living in the Netherlands or Western Europe, if I see floods happening in Pakistan, I shouldn't say, oh, thank God it didn't happen to me. I should think, hey, how come there's floods happening in other places? What have we collectively done as a humanity to cause this and to solve it? So how do we have that one humanity in terms of looking after that, and not saying, oh, alhamdulillah, I'm dry, it's okay. It's like, no, I don't think that is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made us to have that. And again, another thing that attracted me is that especially now with the environmental crisis being so big, it's like, oh, what can I do? And it's like, but even if we do one atom's weight of good, that is counted. So you're not on your own expected to solve the whole world, but you're expected to use the blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. So if you're a poor villager, then this is what you can do. If you're president of a country, then there's other things you can do, each what they were able to do. So yeah, as I said, for me, like in the title you mentioned green Muslim, and I use that term as well, but actually I don't think you can be real Muslim without being green, and not in terms of being extremist, but very much it's like a part of our deen. And maybe to end, maybe a interesting hadith that I know is about a tree hugger. Is that sometimes used as, oh, you're a tree hugger, but actually I read a very nice hadith where indeed the Prophet, peace be upon him, used to lead the prayers from under a tree. And then one day a lady offered to make him a pedestal, and he said, okay, that's okay. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, obviously. And then so then they did the prayers from there, and then the tree started to cry. And then Prophet, peace be upon him, went to the tree and hugged it until it stopped crying. So when somebody says, oh, you're an environmental extremist, you're a tree hugger, I said, alhamdulillah, I'm in lovely company. I wish I could be that kind of environmentalist. And I wish also any viewers on this program so feel inspired to do just even an atom's weight in that direction.
Yes, interestingly, what you said is true. The Quran also says that Ash-Shamsu, in Surah Ar-Rahman, chapter number 55, that وَالشَّجَرُ وَالنَّجْمُ وَالشَّجَرُ يَسْجُدَانِ, that the stars and the trees, yasjudan, they prostrate to Allah. And the trees are a creation that also do tasbih, which is the glorification of Allah. So they, we shouldn't cut off trees unnecessarily. It's a sinful act. And you are also very much right when you say that there is no such thing specifically as a green Muslim, and every Muslim needs to practice environment friendly actions because it's a part of their faith. Now, looking at that, we're coming to a close of our program. What advice would you give people at an individual level, at a household level, in terms of practicing green, and environment-friendly daily activities? What, like, I'm talking about a family that goes shopping, a household. What would be your advice to them, a Muslim family specifically, like in Pakistan? What would be your advice as an environmental activist to them? What do we need to change to help the planet?
I think the main thing is to change our mindset, to become more humble about our role as Khalifa, and not to just do the prayer and think that that's it, but very much about the action. Is in the Quran it says several times is believe and do good deeds. It's not believe and if we have time do good deeds, believe and if we fancy it do good deeds. No, believe and do good deeds. So think about those. But mainly therefore in the mentality setting about that. And once you've got the mentality, you can look at things differently. And every action is useful. If you can do recycling, do recycling. If you can grow something, even in on your balcony or windowsill, do that, and maybe try to get the ball rolling from there. Meet up with your neighbors. Can you have a community garden in that sense? And that is then not just to grow good food, but also getting nutritious food, more social contacts. So it's about not just environment as a add-on, but very much as a general item of human well-being and our duty as humans for creation. So any little thing is good, and once you've got the mentality, you can know what is suitable in your situation. Obviously there's a lot with the different viewers. I cannot assess each individual case what would be suitable for them. If there's no recycling, can any youngsters in the community set up a recycling scheme? If there's no community garden that people can join, can any people set up a community garden? All those kind of things. But the main thing, don't be overwhelmed. Just do one little thing. Even an atom's weight of good is good, and have the awareness of the privilege of being a Muslim, and that we have our guidance from the Quran and Hadith.
Rianne, it was lovely talking to you, and we need you in Pakistan, actually. Let me tell you that we need you, we want you, and we'd like you to come to Pakistan and help us, clean up our environment. With these words, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank all of you who tuned in to see this special podcast. I was talking to Rianne Veen, who is a specialist with environmental issues. She's a Dutch Muslim, and it was really important stuff that she gave out to all of us. Hope to speak to you again. Rianne, thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Well, lots of Pakistanis who can do it. You don't need me, but hopefully I've inspired it. Salam, everyone.